Hey everyone, we have come to the last session of the BeMore Festival 2022. We have Vidhunnan Murugan with us. He's a product designer from Bitbasket, and he's going to share some insights about introduction to motion experience with no code. A quick intro about himself, about him, an engineer turned product designer, a productivity enthusiast, and who is a passionate about helping young designers to become a better designer every day. Vidran believes in simplicity. It is the essence of all his work. This mantra even runs across his product building experiences to solve complex problems. He cleverly crafts unique product design experiences to impact people's lives. He's passionately driven by design, creativity, and tech. Over to you, Vidhunan.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. So happy to be here. Thanks for the it's an amazing intro. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. Let me know if everyone able to see the slides. Sandeep, I think it's good to go. Awesome. Hey everyone, thanks for being here and welcome back. It's our last session. I'm super happy to host this last keynote session. Like super happy for here and thanks for everyone for joining here. So let's a quick intro or just to give a quick intro of myself. I'm Vidhan Murugan and also like many people know I go by Wits. So hey everyone, so I'm a product designer at Big Basket and previously with two more companies called Rocket Team and Tidy, and also as Sandeep mentioned, speaker and the mentor with ADPList and some other platforms also. And one more quick interesting fact: I'm a productivity enthusiast who focused on living a happy, meaningful, and a productive life. And super amazing fun fact: I'm a huge Marvel fan. I think many of you know it. If you don't know it, it's a fun fact for you. And I'm one of the person who watched like all the Marvel movies 3 or 4 times. So that's about me. Let's get into the topic. So let me start with a quote. Any product that needs a manual is to work is broken. It's a quote by Elon Musk, right? So what does it mean? So it means like if a product needs a manual, let's say if you're assembling a furniture, like you need a manual to assemble a furniture, right? Like just take this in digital experiences. So if a product needs a manual, let's say like you are like logging into a new app where it's need like a manual or like if you need a help section to even log in. So what does it means? It means it's broken, like where the experience is not like well designed, right? So let's come back to experience. So how can we make the experiences like much better? So let's talk about a little bit about experiences and how we can see like how motion as an experience is like kind of like bringing the on the top of the every experience is how it's connected or how it's overlaying with everything. So let's start with like a product experience and how the product experience kind of like comes together. So we'll start with UI design, then we have a UX experience, then we have customer experience, and also we have like little bit of visual experience. Experience is more about like how the branding is done, how the videos are done, how the marketing strategies are done. So that's all visual experiences. But if you put motion experience, right, it's going to overlay every single part of the design because motion covers going to like entire part of the product. And let's see if we put how the brand might come into brand experience. So if you push brand experience into motion experience, right, so this is how the entire like a ecosystem or entire like a different parts of experience might come along together. So then what is exactly motion design or motion experience? So motion experience is basically like bringing life to product, but in a broader terms, like motion experience is a combination of motion design with experience and interaction design. When I say with experience and interaction design, right, so we take elements from motion design. It can be like any kind of elements, right? It can be like kind of like animation which is moving from one side of the screen to other side, or which is kind of like giving you like a thumbs up. So it can kind of like different motion experiences or like motion designs with the terms of like combining with experience. How we can make to solve the user problems, or how can we bring user problems, right? So this is how we can use motion experiences, or like we can use motions into solving user problems, or with using animations and motion designs. So basically in terms of like general like in overall experience, like or in overall context, like how can we put motion experience, right? Like it's a bringing life to products. That's the overall like theme that we are going to look into it. So before we get to into, right, I want to bring up the small like few like a quotes from IBM and how they look as a motion or an animation like in a broader term. So animation creates energy within the interface and lets user know what is happening before, during, and after an action. So this is a quote by IBM which says like how an animation creates an energy within a product, and also which tells the users what is happening when an action is like performed by the user at the time of like happening before or like, during the action, and what is happening after the action. So if you say that, if you kind of like look into what Google does it, like Google says it, right? So motion should above all else help use like guide users, providing them with the right information at the right time. So this is by Google. Google is very focused on guiding users with the right information at the right time with the help of motion. But motion is little bit more than that. We have like a lot of things that happens in motion design. So before we go into motion experience, right, let me like kindly kind of like tell the difference between what are like just the UI animations and what are like UX or a motion experience animations are. So let me look into like what are the UI animations are. So UI animations are primarily focused on very visual appearances, which will create more delightful, but not exactly have to be part of the UX solving problem, like a process, right? Or it doesn't have to solve any problem. It can just give a visual pleasing to the users. So let's look at an example. So there is an animation here. Like just like take a second and like look into the animation. So it goes like different areas, right? It has like different elements moving into it. It's a very pretty cool animation, right? But motion experience is not just about UI animation. Motion experience is about creating meaningful or contextual animations, which has to add purpose and life to the product. And it should be like very narrative to the interface, or like how can we make the storytelling narrative, or like how can we get expressive like a kind of like animations into the interface, or how can we connect those things between the user and the digital interface. But how we are going to do it when we say connect, right? How we are going to connect the between the user like the user and the interface. So what user usually like interact with, so those are called interactions, right? So we are going to use interactions to connect between the user and the digital interface. So there are like different ways of connecting, or like different ways of interactions we can look into. The first one, what we are going to look into, it's called real-time interactions. So when I say real-time, right, like when you do an action, it has to reflect on the digital screen. Let's say like you are like dragging an element from one part of the screen to other part of the screen. That's a real-time interaction. So some elements can move across the screen. Some elements might like just like flow across the with your cursor, right? So that's all draggable animation. So then the other example is scrolling, and other example like when you're hovering a mouse hovering a card or like component, or when you're mouse down from a card or a component. So those are like real-time interaction, and you do it, the animation happens. Then the second part of it is non-real time. Non-real time is when you do an action, when a user do an action, after that animation starts. That's called like non-real time. So it can be like when the user like types in website, like let's say google.com and enters. There's a loading animation. That's a non-real time interaction, because user doesn't have to interact, or like user doesn't have to do anything with the interactions. Or when you're clicking it, after that there's an animation happening. Those are called non-real time interaction, or non-real time animations. Then the last part is like the interesting part, which is like voice and device interactions, right? For example, we are like kind of like filled with a lot of devices these days. We might have Echo Show, we might have like Google Max, like a Nest Max. So we have different voice interaction devices. How we are going to communicate with it. There are like multiple ways. Like we don't have to touch the device at all. We can just do it with our voice, or we can do interactions with the touch or with an app, right? So we have different ways of interaction. How the interactions is how we can use motion to make sure that kind of like communicating the right purpose, or like communicate the right information to the right time. So let me show an example here. So I'm going to play a video. Let's see like how the white screen looks here. Is it does it look bad, or does it look good, right? So let me play this video.
Vidhunnan, sorry to interrupt
So,
you in the middle.
sorry.
Like since people are joining from different parts of the world, they won't expect you to speak a little bit slow.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Sorry everyone. Sorry. Yeah, I'll make sure I'll
yeah,
talk
just a
slow.
slow pace. Yeah, that works.
Yes. So so we have widescreen here, right? So it doesn't look exactly good, because we have to kind of like, let me play the video again. So it's kind of plays, and it has a very like a loading screen. It almost takes like 6 seconds to even open a particular screen, and also it doesn't have any information that I'm too sure. So this is one of the very old videos. So that widescreen is like looks very bad, right? So how can we make sure that like kind of like giving a context, or how the motion is going to impact at this certain point of loading, right? So let's talk about how motion is going to impact in like different parts of like product, or that like four different ways like how motion can impact. So starting with narrative storytelling. So to tell a story, right, like how can we use motion to tell a story, or how can we create like a very more engaging experiences using motion? So one of my favorite example is like Google's Home app. There is a like a very interesting things happens here. So it's very like very simple animation and very simple loop, where it has like two different states. So if you look into this animation, right, so there is two different states happening. One is the success and another one is the fail stage. It's like very like interesting to see how they use the same kind of loop to convey two different ending, or two different like a success stage, which is the fail state and which is the success state, right? So it's kind of like interesting how can we use like different like kind of like storytelling within using the same kind of animation. And other way of like storytelling is through onboarding screens. This is where users will kind of like get into the app and want to know more about the app, or what the app can does like things for them, right? So this is where like people will get like a lot of like a kind of like ideas what app can do. So this is another way of using like storytelling like in motion, where we can like engage with users. And second point, and the second impact point is like communication. How can we give feedback to users? How can we give contextual information? Or how can communicate feedback? How can we provide right information at the right time? So moving one of the example from Big Basket is like a baby daily app. So we use like a like kind of like a storytelling like method where we want to like differentiate between like it's a delivery location, what's your location, what's your society. So we have like two different communication method to communicate users how it can happen. So this is one of the example. And making contextual animations, right? Like this is one of the Ubers, like a very old, like a kind of like example where Uber Eats users like a spoke where they can kind of like show the loading. So without even saying loading or without even giving any indication, we were able to understand it. And also it's very contextual. So if you see the product, it's Uber Eats or they have like a utensil which can use for like food, right? So it's very contextual. It also shows what's happening in the background. So this is how we can use animation or like we can communicate different kinds of like what's happening in the background, what's happening in the product. We can use like different kinds of animations to show it. And
Vidhunnan, again, sorry
sorry,
to interrupt. Like people
I
expect you
miss.
to be even bit
I'm
slower.
oh, got it.
Yeah, please.
Okay, cool. Let me cool down for a minute. Then I'll start it again. Yeah.
Sure thing, sure thing.
Okay, cool. Let's look into. Sorry, like yeah, I'll try to make sure as slow as possible. Yeah. So, yes. So Google slider in the home, Google Home, right? Where if you hold, like if you hold the slider and like if you change it, volume changes in the Google Mini app, right? So it can, like in the Google Mini hardware. So this is how like interactions can happen through like a different like a touch through like app and like in the hardware. So how can we use kind of like motion to kind of like show the slider how the values change, how we are controlling that particular like a volume. So we can kind of use a slider or we can use like kind of animations to kind of show it. Then moving on, like what we have here. So here like feedback, right? So here how can we tell like two different states of like a password entry method? So one is the correct password and one is the wrong password. How can we communicate to users to tell right and wrong password? So this is how we can give feedback to users. For example, if you type the wrong password, we can give like a error message. If you type the right password, it gives a success rate. How can we kind of like give feedback by using same kind of interactions? And the third point is like kind of like how to use purposeful animation. Like purposeful means like how can we educate users? How can we like kind of avoid the distractions? Or how can we add expressions? So how can we do certain things, right? So for example, how can you educate users? Like when I told like when you like in the initial stage, like there are different types of interactions, right? Like starting with like a real-time interaction. So when you use real-time interaction, we can kind of like kind of like when the card moves in the Google Keep, like we can show like how the card is like kind of moving here, right? So it kind of tells where the card is going to like fit in the next step. So this kind of we are educating users or we are guiding the users saying that okay, hey, the card is going to like place it here. So you can release the card will get placed here. So we are educating users in a way where the card is going to get placed. And coming back to like guiding users, right? Like this is the one of the very like example where like very like simple example of how the lock screen is like reaction between Android and iOS. So like press home to unlock or like press right to unlock. So if you're waiting for a minute, it's automatically like swipe tells like to unlock, right? The automatically swipes up goes up. So how can we guide users and making it expressive in a way, right? Like how can we make expressive like animation? For example, the rating, like we are starting from 0 1, we are starting like going to 10, right? Like how can we give a like expressive like kind of like into the product? So this is like if it is one, like we have like a very like a sad face. If it's sudden we have a happy face, how can we add expressions to the animations? So this is one of the example we can add expressions in a way of ratings or like in a form of like happy face and a sad face kind of thing. And moving forward, like this is a fourth method where adding micro interactions. So micro interactions especially works when you want to like kind of give a like a very like a playful context or like a playful environment, or if you want to produce like a kind of like a static but you want to still go users what is happening. So and also to want to enhance the user experience in the site or like in a product. So if I see this is a very simple like site, but when you mouse over it, there is small animations happens. When you kind of like click into the hamburger, there's a small like animations happens there. So how you can use like different set of animations to make sure like there's a, like a kind of like creating a vibe or creating a band, like kind of creating personality into the animation also. And this is one of another example where it's a type it's app to create like typefaces from the drawings, right? So once you open the website, there's a falling of like different typefaces happens. So it tells the user like what is the kind of like app it is, what is the kind of like brand they are focusing on. And it's very playful, right? We can use a playful context to create like different sets of animations or different set of context. So now we are on, I think, but how to create all these animations? Like, what are the principles to use? So we all know about like 12 principles of animations, right? But we are going to see something called 12 principles of UX motion. So which has been coined by someone from Isaiah from UX, like UX in dot motion dot net. So the 12 principle like goes from like saying offset. So these are 12 digital principles we can use like creating different animations. Like how can we use like kind of like cloning, or we can use overlays, like what are kind of different animations we can use in the digital product. So now we are seeing what are the impact it can make and what are the kinds of different principles we have. So now like we can understand like motion has been a very critical or crucial element of user interfaces that determine whether solution is successful. So it will help you to kind of like help like find whether the solution has been successful, or how the motion design has played in the very critical role in the user interface also. So but how can we make sure that it's been like hand off like in a right way, or how can we make sure that it's been hand over like in a proper way to the developers? So let's talk about handoff. Like, there are like a three like a different ways to talking about handoff, right? Like starting with text specs. Text specs is basically like you are want to give like a copy, like what are the elements that you chose, and you are going to create a text specs out of it. Text specs is basically, let's say you are moving a position, right, or you are moving your opacity. So you are going to like kind of like give, okay, I moved the position from like X 5 pixels to like X like 25 pixels. So you are going to give that as an like that's a like a value you're going to give. So this is an example how for this animation how a text specs might look like. So like there's like a lot of animation happens, right? Starting from like a data label, which is the top on the date label, which is like what January Monday is. So how the what is the way offset is happening, what is the portion is happening, and what is the curve that we are using? We are using a linear curve, and what is the duration, what is the opacity? So we can use these kind of like a text or kind of like a text outputs where we can directly tell the development team, okay, this is the animation that we are using. And the second one is the chart specs. Chart specs is basically like developed by Google, so they're part of the material design. So chart specs will look like this. So chat spec look like, for example, if for every animation, however, like a, like for example, if it's animation, like what is the radio button, like what is the acceleration is, what is the curve, like what kind of how much position it has to move, what is the opacity it has to. So every single like a property has been layered in a chart in a time with the time across in the bottom. So that's how like a chart animation might look like. And the last one, which is like we all want to know, like what is the no code development, or what is the no code going to impact emotion, right? But when we say no code, it's actually less code, because we have still have to code a little bit to kind of like bring the entire product together, or like we have to like bring the animation. So one of the very no code platform, which is called Lottie, I think we all know this. So we can use Lottie to create no code animations. So I'm going to play a small video from body moving to show like what is Lottie is capable of. Awesome. Great. So the other part is like we have something called Lottie files. I think Lottie files is where like the advanced version of body moving, where we'll be able to create like different files directly from After Effects, and they have like a very like advanced workflow where we can directly like create animations from After Effects and import it to Lottie files and convert it to different sizes we want. And then the second one is like Webflow, where we'll be able to create like very good interactive animations, and we'll be able to export the code from Webflow itself. And the third one, which is my favorite, which is called Animated by IQ, where you'll be able to create like different sets of animations. And the good thing about Animated IQ is you'll be able to export your code in different formats. So if you see it here, right, like you'll be able to export your code from kind of like Vue.js or kind of HTML or CSS. You'll be able to export into different platforms. So if you click on publish, you'll be able to see what kind of like codes that you want, including React to Shift iOS, like, or like you can include like Android, like JavaScript. So you'll be able to export it to different formats. And if you want to create a library, Framer API is the best way to create like different motion library for it. Like how can you can create a library of like different animations, and you'll be able to reuse the components in like different formats. That's a Framer. That's what we use for Framer APIs. And let's say like how can we create this animation? What are the tools that we can use? So I have kind of like separated like tools into like four different categories. So starting with prototype, I will be able to create different sets of prototypes. So Figma, XD, InVision or Sketch will be able to create like different sets of prototypes. So these products are very like kind of like very like clickable products where you can create like very like timeline based animations, or you'll have a restriction to do multiple things. So these are very like a basic prototype tools where you can just create a clickable prototypes. And going through timeline. So starting from After Effects principle, animated by Haiku, and the fourth rule is something called flow, create with flow. So create with flow, you can still able to export different set of like shift codes. And the last one, which is like a recent tool, or it's been like very popular in the last like couple of like, years. I think it's called Jitter. Jitter is like a very low based motion tool that will be able to create motion design very faster, or like kind of like animate UI designs very faster. And third was like interactive tools. So Protopay is one of the like best interactive tool where you'll be able to create different sets of animations or different sets of like interactions. It can be like you can even create 3D interactions, or you can enable like text input where you can type and see like how the text box is like reacting. So you'll be able to create all this like kind of interactions with Protopay and Framer and Webflow. So these are like advanced interactive tools. And the fourth one is like how can we kind of like create codes. So starting with Framer APIs or like Framer where you'll be able to export codes, and Lottie files you'll be able to export codes. And the third one is like animated by Haiku, which is also lets you to export codes. So now we all understood what kind of methods we have, what kind of tools we have, but how to get started, right? Like where we can get started, or like how to get started with motion. Like what is the first step to do? So the first step to is to like audit and identify. For example, you can like audit your app, or like audit like what kind of motions like will help users in certain places, or what like in which product, like in which part of the product that you want to give more hints or clues which will be able to kind of like help the users to perform like different actions. And kind of like patterns and techniques that you want to follow, like what kind of patterns that you want, like techniques that you want to go for in a particular place. And by starting with small experiments, that you don't have to go for like the entire app at a point. You can start by creating like small experiments with prototypes, then like kind of like start a building blocks on the app. So it can be like different cards, it can be text inputs. So you will be able to create different like cards and blocks, and you can create like different interactions or animations like with a small experiments. But by creating the small experiments, you will be able to create a guideline and different motion components. So when I say motion components, like it can be like kind of what kind, like for example, like okay, move left on this value, so or like on this curve. So we can create like different motion components. So set up like a principle. So what kind of principle that you want, like your motion components or like motion library should be, and like add those motion components or motion blocks into your entire design elements. Then moving on, like then what you can do is you can create an entire motion library or a motion system. So organize all the motion blocks into the product, and like create a brand around it, and also like try to create like default animation valid state for static elements. So this in this way you'll be able to create an entire motion library or a motion or a motion like a system along with it. So coming back to my old like statement, like any product that needs a manual to be broken. So this is where I believe like motion experience is kind of like helping us to doesn't need a manual, and how can we create like a entire product or entire experience from using motion design itself. So yeah, you can connect with me later, and that's it from me, folks. Yes.
Hey, Vidhunnan. First of all, thank you so much. It was like a very fruitful content for everyone who is aspiring to become a motion designer, or for product
Thank you.
designers who wants to get into the motion design space as well. We have a couple of questions here, and we got like
Awesome. Yes.
15 more minutes as well. Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Let's
Yeah. The
take it.
first
Yes.
question: how do we stay in the lane and not overdo animation products? And especially like as budding motion designers, like they tend to overdo things, right? It's the right question too.
So this is like we can take in the overall context. Like let's say like why we had to do the animation. So we have to ask the question like what is the main purpose that we are trying to solve on this, or like what kind of like a like purpose that we are, or user problem we are trying to solve. So based on that, we will have to like sorry, we have to make sure that we are not doing the animation, like overdoing the animation. For example, let's say like there is a celebration icon, but how much second that celebration icon, or there's a payment success screen. So payment success screen, people will immediately know once it moved, right? Like we don't have to like keep it for like more than a second. So how can, like, that's a kind of like a principle we have to look into to make sure we are not doing the animation like too much. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and we got one question. Yeah, what's the best way to use Lottie animations in our designs?
Awesome. That's a very good question actually. So because like there are like a lot of ways to use it, but also make sure like whenever you're kind of like bringing the Lottie animation, so where it like, and also Lottie animations are very good for like static designs. So because like we can't do like full fledged like interactions with Lottie right now, so it's very good like in the terms of like onboarding screens on the date of like or in the kind of like celebrity screens or kind of like telling a like success stage. So those are the kind of like best ways to kind of use Lottie. So in overall context, I think static animations are the best way to choose Lottie animations.
Cool. So we have one question. It's related to the resource they are looking for, like which you missed to
Awesome.
add it in the slides. Yeah.
Oh,
What motion designers
sorry.
do you
Yes.
admire, and how does their work influence your work?
So I think Saptashri has a very good like a motion like a master class on YouTube. So we should definitely check it out. So Saptashri from Suki has a like a very amazing course, and also like there is a like YouTuber called Dope Motion and Design Pilot. So those they have like amazing like courses and amazing motion design resources, and also like School of Motion is the best way to learn like After Effects.
Great. Yeah. So this is in terms of accessibility of the experience. So how does motion animation
Mm,
impact on accessibility of the user interface of an app?
I'm not sure like whether I understand the question like accessibility because it can like go into like different ways, right? Like it can be like, let's say like the people who might have like emotion like kind of sickness and also like they can't like there's options like that we can even reduce the motion. So I'm not sure exactly what the question is, and in the accessibility wise I have not explored like that much, so I'm not sure like the right person to kind of like go ahead with it. So I think we can skip this for now. Yes.
Yeah. And I think you have already addressed this question. If you want to add some more to it, you can add.
Could you please? Okay, so tools in day-to-day life, like I think After Effects is the best one, and also like I think Figma is getting like a lot better in like creating like smart animations. So I think you can use Figma also for creating like very simple animations. But like I think After Effects is the next tool which I would suggest to kind of like go ahead with the right to day tool. But also like there are like other tools like Protopy and Simple for Mac. So Principle for Mac. So those are other tools which you can also like try into day-to-day use.
Yep.
Hmm. Okay, so one of my favorite motion design project, I think okay, so like I think I might have to recollect it because it's there are like a lot of projects which I like daily look into it. So I think maybe the recent one. Hmm, interesting. Oh, I think I think I can say like I think the no conference video by Webflow. I think that one of the amazing video. Like I think it still comes to my mind every time if I think of some kind of like emotion design projects, which like kind of like which I'm like kind of like have a favorite projects. So I'm sure like it's not one of my project, but because like some of the projects are like, kind of like in a very like small scale. But yeah, that's one of the projects which I kind of like look into like aspiration projects like, most of the time. There is a book called Motion Design, and there is I don't think there's any particular book which talks about motion experience, but there's a book called Motion Design which talks about every like starting with story framing, starting with like styling, like creating like style sheets, so it goes like very in depth in motion process. But for motion experience, I think UX and motion.net is the best resource that you can look into it.
Cool. We have one more question related to the same lines. Let's say, like, you can ignore the tools part, which you already mentioned, but you can
Yes.
share your knowledge about the standards, the process that you follow.
Yes. So I mean, as when we try to like create a motion design, like or a process, right, we have to look into what kind of like purpose we are creating. But that's where like it starts with. But also like trying to create what kind of interaction that we can have. So think about how users will kind of interact with the product. That might be the different like way of thinking, like to kind of like start with the process, and also make, like when you are creating an animation or when you are creating a Lottie file, make sure that it's very like a low file, like kind of like in a very low files, so that like it can be easily deployed also. And also not like I mean like you have to think about like bring the developers also into it, so that like they can also like bring the context, and like they can bring the what is the feasibility that they can also provide into the like a app, and they can also like give us like more context like how the app structure is also. So those are kind of like a process and the like a collaboration process which I follow, so that like we don't have to like overdo it and like instead of like reducing it again.
Yeah, we got one from MD Kausa.
Yes, we have to create a storyline, or we have to at least have like a very basic storyline, so can we can see how the animation can turn out to be at the later stages. So we should definitely have a storyline before we are creating animation. So it can be just a love storyline, but we should have a storyline before it.
We got one more question. Like I can reframe it for you. So how does the
Sure, awesome.
design developer handoff should be like when it comes to motion design? Is there a better way
So
to follow?
there are like, yes, there are different ways. Like the one of the methods I think everyone uses is like, for example, let's say like there are like two ways to look at it. If there's a static animation, there is no interactions happens, then Lottie is the best way to like kind of give the handoff. Like if the static animation, if the interactions has to happen between like by clicking and tapping, then I think we have to work with the developers, like make sure that animation like telling the what kind of like like properties that we are looking into. How can we convert these properties into CSS code or a React code? How can we do it? So we have to collaborate with the developers to kind of like create that animation.
Yeah. So one from Louis.
What are the challenges? I think challenges are always the kind of like the implement stage, because we tend to like do little bit overdo like most of the time. So we have to like kind of like start with like not thinking very like advanced animation or like very complex animation. Make sure we are kind of like always thinking with a very simple one, because most of the time very simple animation solves the user problem. Hmm. Okay. Or how to maintain a good balance? There is no happening on the screen, but I think this is like kind of like reframing the question. I think yes, making sure that you're not using like it's also like kind of like design, right? Make sure like your design elements is not too much. So starting with the very wireframe stage, or like very like the you are like a visual design stage, if not sure, making that you're not like adding like too much visuals or like too much elements into the screen.
Yeah, we have one from Anushriya.
So which application I start with? Figma, like any prototype tool would work. Then gradually start like more, for example, like try After Effects, or try like maybe like any timeline based tool next thing, and maybe like next one would be the like most interactive like prototype or like principal tools. So that would be the stage. Start with any like basic prototyping tools, then go with the timeline, then go with like any like interactive tools. That would be like my kind of like recommendation to kind of go like start with if you have no prior experience.
Yeah, one more. Okay.
Yes, it's always mostly from Dribble and Instagram these days. So that's where I take most of my motion design inspirations. And Vimeo. Vimeo is like has like very amazing community of like motion design, like motion inspirations. So there's two difference. Like motion design is like kind of different. Like in motion design, we might have to consider the entire story and what's the communication that we are looking into. But when you're creating a motion design for an app, like we have to consider, okay, what is like user is going to see, how this is going to like kind of like add value to the user. So that's how like we will try to create like these are things to consider like before creating a storyboard or a storyline. For example, if let's say like if the payment animation or like a location animation happens, like what is the information, like what are the kinds of like data points or like information that we need to provide to the user at the certain time. So those are the kinds of things we to consider like before starting a storyboard or a storyline, like before starting into motion design.
Yeah, we have one more question related to the
Awesome,
storyline.
awesome, yeah. I think this is. I think it's always like it depends upon different iterations and like what kind of dimensions we are looking to. I think like most of the time we like some of the time we can decide with the storyboard itself. Like okay, let's say like hey, I want this animation to be like just comes from like left side of or like right side of the screen, but also like not has to be like kind of like appear or like pop, like those kind of like things we can decide. But it's always like kind of like different iterations. There's no like no predefined outlines like kind of we can do.
Yeah, and we have one more question. I will reframe it. So, how do you
Sure,
incorporate
awesome.
incorporate your animations in your product? So, do you prefer to go with Lottie, or like is there any other format?
It's I think Lottie has like established the industry standards. I think Lottie is the best way to go for now.
Okay.
And I think there's a one more app coming. It's called Rift. Like it's still a still explosion stage, but that also has like a different like kind of like very good like export like kind of like options or features in it. to make motion designs like subtle and impactful. It's all comes under like to the point like, okay, like exactly the design elements on the design. I think that's where it all starts, right? Like how to create a storyboard, how to make like very like it, even a single element or a very single like kind of like conflict, it can make you like very successful impact based upon the what kind of message also. So these are kind of like things has to consider like before like a design, like before going to like kind of like creating any like a motion design or any storyboard itself. So what kind of like elements that we want to give to the users at this point, and also it's kind of like depends upon what is the kind of like product kind of like style that we are also looking. So it might it's impact like a lot of things to make like certain animation impactful. So even a single element might create a lot of impact in certain cases.
Yeah, and we have one more question related to the resource.
Motion templates. I think motion templates. I think Invento. I think, or there is this one. Invento Elements has like a really good motion templates. That's one of the motion. Like if you're looking for motion templates, I think that can. But that's like this all will be like kind of related to like kind of like more like advertisement templates, not in terms of we are looking into like UI, because like UI templates are like kind of like created like after like done the UI stage. Like so, UI templates, I'm kind of like looking into it, but yeah, like you can create like a lot of motion templates from anyone to sure.
Yeah.
Yes, so those are like kind of like things we have to look into, right? Like it's like kind of like what is the like how much time it's going to impact to create an animation, or how much time it's going to take to impact like to implement a like different set of animation. So all these factors will be like kind of like impacted to implemented by the developers. That's why we have to be clear like in the initial stages of what we are going to do at this screen, or what kind of animation that we are going to do. And yeah, double animations are like kind of like created like 3D animations are there. So it's always like some of the animations can be recreated, but it takes going to take a lot of time. Yeah, I think there are like even Lottie files has a like I mean plugin in Figma where you can take Lottie files, like create a Lottie files, and you can put it into your prototype itself. It will convert into a GIF and it will play into your prototype itself. That's a very good that's a very good like workflow. What we wanted to add like a motion like I mean kind of like Lottie files into a prototype itself. Or like if you want to create like very motion, I think you have to like kind of like fine tune every single element between different interactions. So for example, let's say you have like a card with like image, the image has to move to like which image has to like go to full like a full width, right? You have to make sure that you have create like maybe like another two cards and create an auto animation between those things. So it will help you to kind of like add this all the animation like in a very like in a very single flow, so it will look like the animation has been added the right proper method. So that's one of the way to kind of create a like a motions and prototypes. I think we answered this question, right? Sandeep? I think we answered that this one. Like if you,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes,
One second.
yes.
So there is like one question like which is like too deep. Basically, it's a long chain process. Like, how does motion
Okay.
design or interactions impact websites' loading times and sustainability (in brackets carbon emissions)?
That's a
So
good question. Like it's a very like good question. I think like it's impacts the loading time, but also actually yes, it's going to impact carbon emission, because if it's loading time impact, we are using the energy. So that's a very good question. Like it's but I don't have like a exact answer towards it. But I would love to talk to you, Jade, and we can like kind of see like where it goes, and we can find out like maybe we can even write a article about it. I'm happy to kind of like step in and we'll see we can talk about it.
yeah, again, I'll reframe this question: like, how to include motion while
Yes.
design on Figma or XD. So while using tools like Figma and XD, and you're trying to create a prototype or a mock-up out of it. So what is the best way to implement the motion design inside it? Let's say like you have created something outside in Lottie or After Effects anyway. So how do you implement in your design tools?
Sounds good. So there is no like a proper way to kind of like bring videos into like prototypes, right? Or into like any like a kind of like prototype tools. But if you create a Lottie, you can use the Lottie plugin to kind of like bring that animation as a GIF, and you can use it. So if you put GIF in Figma prototypes, it will kind of play as a loop. So that's a one way. And if you want to create like let's say like you want to create like proper motion and things, like you have to use like in XD you have to use smart like auto animate, and in Figma you have to use smart animate using different frames, like starting from like let's say like step one, like kind of like starting with sorry like starting like step like frame one, and like ended like kind of like creating another frame, and like in between like start run frame, you have to create like multiple frames, then we have to like kind of like do it.
Yeah. Yeah. One more question.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Uh, Canal inclusivity design utilizing. Mm.
Basically,
So I
equity
want to
design,
understand.
like designing
Yes.
for everyone, right?
Yes.
In short.
I mean, so yeah, but I mean, I'm not sure exactly how can we do it, like because like I have not explored this particular like inclusive design yet, on especially on motion transitions or motion interactions. So I'm sorry, like I think we'll connect and we can discuss about it.
So this is like outside product design.
Yes. So there is an entire field called like motion design, like why we should use motion design graphics. Okay. Let's say it's all like concept like storytelling. If you don't want to sell a product, you have to use a storytelling, use motion design to tell that story. Like that's why like motion graphics helps us like very like a very amazing method where we can like tell different sets of stories. It can be animation or it can like use like entire product into like kind of creating the entire story.
I think we are almost like answered most of the questions there.
Awesome.
And yeah, for folks like who's like more passionate about no code tools, productivity, please check out Vidhunan's Instagram channel. Okay, and then he also running his own podcast called Get Together. You can reach out to him on ADPList platform, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram.
Thank you, Sandeep. Yes, yes.
Like any like one liner punch thing for the folks who are like getting into the product design you want to share, Vidhunan?
Sorry, Sandeep. I think I missed the like kind of like in between. Like, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
Any one liner or any sort of line or like the one thing that you follow that you want to share with the design motion design aspirants especially, can you share
So I mean,
something?
so yes, yes. So in the terms of like motion design, like I think it's not just in the terms of motion design. So in the terms of design, like I would definitely like try to keep it as simple as possible. Like simple as kind of like simple as like try to kind of like keep it as simple as possible. I think that's the one thing which I always like kind of like try to keep it so that like it's always kind of like I mean people can easily understand and like it's make it as simple as possible. So don't give like cognitive load. So that's the kind of like things I try to follow. And yeah, so simplicity is something which yes. Hey Felix, thanks so much.
Hey everyone, can you all hear me?
Wow. Hey Felix, hi man. How
Hey,
are you? Hey,
Vince,
hi.
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for
Thanks for
this
joining in for the
amazing.
last keynote. It's awesome to see you like here.
Exactly. Thank you so much. And yeah, I wanted to hop on as a final surprise for everyone here. Including the attendees and the speakers as well. So as long as you're seeing this, this is like the final surprise. I've got some amazing announcement to make. So I'm gonna do it on this final session. And yeah, let's get started. So thank you all, first of all. Thank you all so much for spending the past 24 hours. It was such a crazy 24 hours with every one of you here. Exciting announcement has been made. We have launched a couple of things, but most importantly, we really enjoyed the fact that everyone from every part of the world just comes together, learn and make friends. I think that's the most important thing. And with that, I just want to say thank you all so much for your participation. And the next one is obviously all the speakers, right? So thank you all so much for being a part of BeMore 2022. Amazing speakers. And with everything said, this has really encouraged the team to do a BeMore 2023. So we're gonna see all of you next year. Very excited, and a big shout out to the team that worked the past 24 hours. Some of them, I think they didn't get any sleep, so they're probably gonna get some sleep now. But thank you all so much, and I hope to see you all next year. And finally, last but not least, finally, all of you here, attendees and speakers, will be getting an exclusive NFT card that you can claim for free from ADPList with the link here. So I'm going to send with the Twitter link, and you'll also be receiving it directly on your email, if not tonight, today, or if not tomorrow. So everyone will get an NFT card that represents that you have attended this year's BeMore 2022. That card will perhaps open up some magical door for you in the future in this community. So keep that very close. Go and claim it. And that's it. Thank you all so much for coming together as a community to really forward this mission to democratize mentorship for all. Thank you all and have a good day. Thank you.
Thanks, Felix. Hey, everyone. Have a good day.